Yet they were heads of departments at well-established universities who were teaching these very theories. Unbelievable, but it's happening today. Unbelievable, look at the policies that govern this nation. We can go to any area or field. We can go to economics and see how unreal, for instance, is Keynesian economics, yet it dominates the economic theory of the people in our government. You go to every area and you start uncovering, you start penetration with the mind of God, and you can shoot holes through all of their foundations that are the enslavement of the people. So gird up the loins of your minds, because this is where you must become sharp, know your subject, study it well, study their arguments, study the facts, and be ready to deliver the word in the midst of any discussion or controversy, and let people's arguments fall, and let them fall on their faces with them, and then help pick them up and realign them with a Christ consciousness. The notion that there existed a superior race crystallized in the consciousness of modern men with the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species. You've heard of that famous work, Origin of Species. But have you heard its full title, which is never quoted? The title of the book is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of the Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. They've simply conveniently dropped the end of the title, which reveals the purpose of the book. The very purpose of the book was to show scientifically that it is necessary to preserve the favored races in the struggle for life. 1859 is the date of that work. You need to know it. It's a permanent date you recognize, because the publication of Darwin's work changed the course of modern thinking concerning how man evolved. The impact of it cannot be overestimated. His theories seem to reawaken in the Nephilim their ancient pattern of ruling as the gods over men. Karl Marx was so impressed by Darwin's work, he wanted to dedicate one of the editions of Das Kapital to Darwin. Darwin, however, refused. What Darwin's theory does not take into account is the acceleration of evolution through the cross-breeding of Homo erectus with the genes of the Nephilim. Darwin's position on evolution has gaps in it, as scientists will say, but they will tell you that further investigation and discoveries will probably narrow those gaps until we can trace the evolution of life from the simplest form to complex man. Darwin was trying to establish that there was an evolution of mankind from the ape and prior to the ape to its present manifestation. In fact, the evolution was through those various forms, but it was interrupted and accelerated by the introduction of the genes of the Nephilim, which accounts for this sudden reemergence and unexpected vigor of Homo sapiens at this inexplicably higher level of culture. 75,000 years ago, the time of deprivation at the hand of the Nephilim begins. That deprivation, as seeds of population control, was practiced because the ones they had created now had learned the art and science of biological reproduction, which gave them freedom to procreate aside from the dictates of their overlords. So when the population gets out of control, when you cannot control their birth methods, you have to inflict upon them both a philosophy and a forced control in order to maintain your status as a superior race. So the population control that we're examining today began 75,000 years ago. At least at this point, these are the most recent records available to us. Their deprivations included the misuse of weather, the manipulation of weather, which we have weather warfare today, germ warfare, which we have today, the introduction of plagues and diseases without supplying the remedies, the manipulation of crops, the manipulation of the waters, the withholding of food. You'll find in modern revolutions, the way revolutions against the light are created is by the manipulation of food. You'll find an abundance of food that is locked up and kept away from the people. The people begin to starve, so they rise up and they rebel against their governments and therefore create revolutions. The French Revolution was staged that way, the Russian Revolution, and in America today we have such federal controls on our farmers that it is ripe for manipulation of food to create revolution here. And there it was practiced then, withhold the food, and of course this was not so much to create rebellion as to simply cause the people to starve to death. So what we're going to see is that the exact tactics used then are being used today. All of a sudden, the Homo sapien population began to drop precipitously for no apparent reason, except the fact that the Nephilim are manipulating population. 13,000 years ago, Noah's flood is triggered by the orbital passage of Marduk close to the Earth. And then 11,000 years ago, the reemergence of the Homo sapien culture, and that is predicated on the theory that Enki caused the survival of Noah and his family, and therefore the multiplication and no doubt the reintroduction of now population control to cause it to multiply rather than decrease in order to now meet the needs of the fallen ones. So in any case, Darwin's theory falls apart by the very fact that there are skips in the evolution. It falls apart because he does not take into account the mechanization concept. Years ago, before that mechanization concept was dictated, and before we obviously had any awareness of this book on the 12th planet, we were teaching students who came to La Tourelle the fact that Darwin's theory, which postulates this gradual evolution to a higher state of consciousness, was an entire misstatement of the fact that in reality there had been prior golden ages. There had been then the rebellion against Almighty God by the children of the light. There ensued cataclysm and the fall or the descent of consciousness, so that people themselves no longer reflected the highest state of their being the offspring of God, but degenerated to very, very primitive states. So the children of the light also fell, and fell to a very low estate. Along with the children of the light, in those more primitive manifestations, there is always present the possibility of the creations of Nephilim. If they occurred 500,000 years ago, why could not they have occurred before? So there seems to be the side-by-side manifestation of similar evolutions. The children of the light did not have to fall, but they did, which put them on a par with the primitive creations of the Nephilim. So the children of the light, by their disobedience, came to a situation where they were evolving on a planet with a creation that perhaps appeared to be like themselves, but was not in any way like themselves in origin. But the children of the light would have to rise out of that condition by obedience to God and to the saviors who would come, sponsored by Sanat Kumara. And that is exactly what persists to the present hour. The children of the light are finally coming back to God, but they find themselves among people who, by the very mechanization concept, by their programming, by their infusion with intelligence, and in many cases superior intelligence, appear to them to be on a competitive level. You have a threefold flame, you are a child of the light, your bodies are no part of this evolution of mankind.